But today, here we are, holding a hearing on the effect of Middle East unrest on the oil market, as though the Republican legislation that will dramatically increase our dependence on Middle Eastern oil didn't even exist. It reminds me a lot of when Monsignor O'Malley used to go up into the pulpit on Sunday and lecture to the congregation that on Wednesday in the church hall, Father Guiney will lecture on the evils of gambling. On Thursday night in the church hall, bingo. Well, yesterday we're lectured on the evils of the EPA. Today, bingo, Egypt. Bingo, Iraq, Iran, Tunisia. Bingo, 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 bingo. So let me ask each of you. Let's go down the list, and I'd like a yes, a no, on whether or not you feel it's important for us to stop $162 billion a year going to OPEC, going to Middle Eastern countries that are paid for by American consumers at $90 a barrel, so that we're not subsidizing religious fanaticism in Saudi Arabia. We're not subsidizing rockets being constructed in Iran that are then used by Hezbollah and Hamas against Israel and against our countries. So let me just ask each of you if you believe, number one, that reducing our dependence upon imported oil from the Middle East is important. Dr. Newell, yes or no?
That would tend to involve a policy position which I'm not in a
Okay, Mr. Marr, is that important?
Sir, as a representative of another government, I'm not.
Okay, Mr. Szymanski, is that important? We're talking about Egypt here. It's a hearing on Egypt and its impact on oil prices. And we're talking about the Middle East here, not Canada. We're not talking about Norway.
How about that? Would that be okay?
Mr. Szymanski?
Mr. Markey, I'm going to try to answer your question, actually, but I can't do it in one word. I'll try to be brief.
No, thank you. Mr. Hofmeister, yes and no? Is it important for us to reduce our oil dependence on the Middle East? Yes, Mr. Hofmeister.
Mr. Markey, my answer to that would be no, then, if I can only say
it's
one
not
word.
important. Okay, thank you. Mr. Hofmeister.
Absolutely critical to reduce dependence on the Middle East.
Thank you. Dr. Bush.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's important to increase our domestic production, and if that means reduced from the Middle East, in my
But
yes.
should our goal be to reduce
Yes.
dependence upon Middle Eastern oil? Okay, thank you. Now, so given that, should we be unilaterally disarming ourselves of any of the weapons that we have in our arsenal to reduce demand for Middle Eastern oil? Mr. John.
Mr. Markey, you are still on the top of your game, but
And under the 5-minute rule.
yes. So four corners doesn't work here. Then no, you know obviously you bring a very good point. The point is that America and the world consumption of oil is going to increase.
Okay. Bottom line, can I say this? I'm going to run out of time. Bottom line here is we can't afford to not improve the fuel economy standards of the vehicles which we drive. That is our number one weapon against the Middle East. That's when we're teaching them a lesson. That's President Kennedy telling Khrushchev, we're putting a man on the moon in 10 years and bringing him back. You're not controlling outer space. We're using our technology to dominate you, okay? That's our message to the Middle East. They have 70% of the oil reserves in the world, the Middle East. We cannot beat them at that game with only 3% of the oil reserves. It is irresponsible to talk about basically tying the hands of the EPA to improve our ability to make ourselves efficient, to back out this oil from the Middle East. And next week's vote, if we have it, will be a historical one.
Mr. Sullivan, you recognize 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having me follow Mr. Markey. It's not something I enjoy very much, and he is very good, by the way, at what he does.